Thank you all for coming out on this dreary afternoon. Welcome to the 2024 Budig Lecture. My name is Lisa McLendon, and I am the 2024 Budig Professor of Writing. Thank you, yeah. And here's who I am, according to ChatGPT. So I guess I am a respected academic, known for my expertise in journalism, mass comm. Okay, thank you, ChatGPT, that's very nice. I am a faculty member at the University of, it's getting better, okay? It is getting a lot better. It's gotten a lot better in the past couple of years. It put me in the right place. It put me in the right field. Okay, I focus on teaching and research related to media ethics. Not really. Digital journalism, sure, and the evolving landscape of news dissemination, okay. I mean, I think you could probably argue that all of our faculty here work on ethics, digital, and evolving landscape of news dissemination. So not super specific here, but okay, well, let's go. Let's go. I'm recognized for my contributions to the field through various publications and commitment to fostering critical thinking among her students. Hopefully, I don't know, what do you think, guys? Yes. All right, close, maybe? Okay. And I often emphasize the importance of integrity in journalism and the role of media in society. Yeah, but not exactly right. I mean, it's close-ish, but not quite there. And that is kind of where generative AI with text is at right now. It's close-ish, but not quite there, all right? Because who I really am is, yes, I'm here at the KU School of Journalism and Mass Communications. I teach editing. I teach writing. And a lot of my work is in editing. And it kind of missed that completely, especially given the fact that I run the Bremner Editing Center here at KU. It might have picked up on that. It did not pick up on that. I'm also the coordinator of our JMC 104 class, which is the first writing class for students in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. And we have 15 sections of that this fall. It's a lot of classes. Thank you for some of my fellow instructors coming to support this. Before I came here, I worked as a newspaper copy editor. And that is my professional background in news was as a copy editor, news editor, not a reporter. And I've also written about grammar. I love grammar. I love to talk about grammar. That's not really what we're going to talk about today. But if you want to get me off on a tangent, ask about that. So what we're talking about today is we're talking about why we write, why we as people write, how we write, what is the process there, what a machine can and can't do in terms of writing, and why we still need human beings involved in that process, why we are still really important to that writing process. Okay, so why we started to write. Humans started to write thousands of years ago, okay? Basically for informational purposes and recording purposes, all right? Anybody know what this is? Well, I thought I heard it. Cuneiform writing, okay. This was in ancient Sumeria. It's not a cookie, okay? This is actually a clay tablet. It's thousands of years old. Anybody know what they originally used cuneiform writing for? Accounting, bookkeeping, yeah. Basically, they bought this many cows or sheep or bushels of wheat or jugs of wine or whatever. And they owe us this much money, or we received this and we paid this out. It was bookkeeping. It was accounting. And thousands of years later, we have the written record of that. Which, I mean, it's as good a place as any to start with writing. But we moved beyond recording and informing with writing. I mean, as you all well know, all right? We are here as writers, not just to record and inform, but to entertain, all right? We read novels, we read poems, we read short stories, we read scripts, okay, just for entertainment. We read to gain other perspectives, to enlighten ourselves, to enlighten others. We try to persuade people. Persuade them of our viewpoint, persuade them to buy our stuff, persuade them to do something, think something. That's a pretty powerful motive to write, it's persuasion. Reflection. Maybe we keep journals and diaries. Maybe they're not for anybody but ourselves, but we write things down. to both record and reflect. We just do it for the sake of doing it because we want to do it for ourselves. We're not doing that for an audience necessarily. To illuminate, maybe we are shining light on something that was previously unknown, untold. That's another reason that we write. We write to challenge people. It's a little bit different from persuasion. Persuasion, we're bringing them around to our point of view. Challenge is a little bit more direct. Challenging people to do something, challenging people to think something, to push back against something, or to inspire people. We've got a lot of different reasons that we write now beyond simple recording information. Beyond simple recording information. Writing is different from speaking because humans will instinctively learn to speak. If you put a baby human in a group of other humans, the baby learns to talk, in most cases. But we don't naturally write. We have to be taught to write. And we learn to make our letters, and we learn to make words, and we have spelling. We learn to do paragraphs. We learn to do the 5-paragraph essay. We go beyond that. We go to all different kinds of formats and genres of writing. But we have to be taught how to do that. It's not something that comes naturally. Telling a story is something that comes very naturally to humans. Telling that story, but writing the story is a different matter indeed. And so when I teach writing, I think about, there's really 2 parts to writing. Okay, you have the process and you have the product. All right, the product is what you are hoping to end up with writing. But there's a process that gets us there, okay? Because we have to be taught how to write. There are steps in that process that we take to get there. And sometimes it's very simple, like with little children, the first step is learning how to make the letters. Write your name, write your family's names, write things like that. But when we're talking about longer kinds of things, different kinds of writing, different genres of writing, we're talking about a step-by-step process. And this is, what we really refine when we get to writing in a university setting. Okay, you don't just sit down and dash something off. You can, but generally you're not done. Okay, even if you're jotting something down on the back of a napkin when you're having a brainstorming session, in a cafe over a cup of coffee. Oh, hey, let me write this down. Okay, you're still thinking about it. When you're getting ready to actually start crafting a product, the thinking is just the first step, all right? You have to plan. What am I doing here? What is the purpose of this piece of writing? Who is this for? Who am I writing for? And this is one of those things that's kind of tricky. For the first year students here, a lot of times they haven't really thought about who they're writing for. They're writing for their English teacher. Okay, well, that's not who you're writing for in real life. What kind of an audience are you writing for? Are you writing for your peers? Are you writing for people outside of that? Are you writing for younger people? Are you writing for older people? Are you writing for people who are doing a specific task? Are you writing for people who are searching for a certain kind of information? That's what you're thinking and planning, and you're figuring that out in this part of the writing process. Gather and verify information. Okay, this can be called research. This can be called reporting. This can be called doing the Google search. There's a lot of ways that we gather information, but an important part of this process is not just the gathering of the information, but the verification of that information. Okay, is this good information? Is this credible information? And then the winnowing of that information. Not only is this good information, is it credible information? Is it information that is going to help me with the product that I am planning? Okay, when I work with students who are doing reporting, they usually, they have a whole bunch of information. They've talked to lots of people, they've read lots of things, they have all this information, they have a big bucket of information. Okay, great. You don't use the whole bucket, you pick out the best bits. You pick out the parts that you actually need for this. And the reason that you get the whole bucket of information is so that you have stuff to pick from. Sometimes information is just a stepping stone to the piece of information that you actually need, that you have to learn something before you get to the piece that you actually need. It's not a waste of time. It's part of that process. It's part of that process. Then you draft. Notice I didn't say write, I said draft. Because you are writing, but it's not done, and you know it's not done, and you know you're just trying to take that plan and get it down, all right, and turn that plan into words and figure out, is this meeting my purpose? Is this connecting with my audience? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, which is why maybe you let it sit. Maybe you let someone else read it. Maybe then you revise it, all right? Again, and again, and again, if need be. And sometimes my students are like, wow, really? You have to revise it like more than once? Yes, you have to revise it like more than once. And people who write professionally for a living, you all know the final product has been revised a lot of times in lots of cases. This is not just, oh, I'm going to dash off a first draft, I'm going to revise, and then I'm done. Okay? With smaller things, sure. With bigger things, no. No, you revise, you think about it a little bit more, you get some feedback, you revise it again. And then finally, you have a product that you publish, you share, you submit. It's an involved process. It's not a natural process. We have to practice it. We have to learn how to do it, and we have to practice it. Because we have time to plan and think and revise, we have the opportunity with writing in a way that we don't have in speech to really polish it, to really reflect about, is this the best way to serve my audience's needs? Is this the best way to convey this piece of information, this idea to my audience? And it does take time. We have that opportunity, which is why writing, we expect to be more polished than a transcript of something. You know, if you have a transcript of somebody being interviewed on TV, it's going to seem a little choppy in places. It might seem a little disjointed. Somebody starts talking, they pause, they go off in a different direction. That's naturally how we speak. When you're listening, it doesn't make any difference. It seems very natural. But on the page, if you've ever read a transcript, how many of you have ever read a transcript? It's like, whoa. Or your own transcript, and you're like, wow, do I sound like that? And yeah, we do sound like that. And most of the time, it doesn't really matter because people are listening in the moment. But writing is different. Writing is not for in the moment. Writing is possibly for thousands of years. And it takes time and it takes practice to get good at this. A lot of time, a lot of practice. But it does take time and practice. So once you've got your product, this is kind of the beauty of writing as opposed to speech. Okay? It's durable. It can be read more than once. You can have a whole bunch of visits to your website. Multiple people can read a book. You can print lots of copies of a book and lots of people can read it. You can write it and people can read it long after you wrote it. You can write it and people who don't know you can read it. People who don't live anywhere near you can read it. You can disseminate it worldwide. It goes across time, it goes across place. And sometimes we have to remember that it is also shaped by time and place. You know, you read something that was written a couple hundred or a couple thousand years ago, and it's going to be very different from how we might write today. It's going to reflect different systems in place, different values of a different time. But we still have it because it was written down. It wasn't just a conversation. It wasn't just someone's thought. It wasn't just a lecture. It was written. So we kind of are led to think after this, is writing something that is uniquely human? One would be forgiven for thinking so, because who else, what else would go through this whole iterative process of writing, the whole process of coming up with a product that is polished, that has a purpose, that has an audience in mind? But as we've learned over the past couple of years, machines can write. They can write. Not just photocopiers, but they can actually write. All right? So I'm going to take a minute and talk about what exactly generative AI is. What can it do? It's pretty impressive. It can do a lot of stuff. But of course, it also has limitations. It also has limitations. So just a little bit of basic terminology. I know some of you know this, so please bear with me for just a minute, because some of you probably don't. Okay? AI is just a general term for artificial intelligence. It doesn't necessarily mean ChatGPT. Okay? We kind of use it interchangeably sometimes with ChatGPT or a generative AI, but artificial intelligence is basically anything, any system that can complete a task by itself. Okay? And it can have absolutely nothing to do with writing. It can analyze numbers, it can analyze images, it can do all kinds of different kinds of things. It's just something that you can just like let it go on its own and it will do that, okay? If the system can learn from the tasks it completes, that is machine learning. And some systems are set up to be able to incorporate some feedback and things like that after it completes a task to do the task better the next time, all right? Generative AI is AI that generates content. Okay, so it's not just necessarily doing an analysis or doing a tedious task all by itself, but it's something that you ask it to generate some content like writing, like art, video, audio, and it will do that. And it will do that. Okay. Large language models. That's an LLM, if you ever see that. It's a large language model, and it is a kind of AI that analyzes gigantic amounts of writing, like a lot of writing, a whole bunch of writing. And we're talking billions of words here. You know, I mean, imagine everything in Watson Library and then multiply it by thousands, if not millions. Okay, these are big computers, big models. Training data is the stuff that LLMs get trained on. Okay, so all the information, all the words that you feed into an LLM, that is called training data. That is the data that it is trained on. So an LLM is only as good as its training data, which is kind of important. So why does AI write? AI writes because we ask it to. We tell it to. Hey, ChatGPT, give me a brief biography of Lisa McLendon. I did say Professor Lisa McLendon because there is a gospel singer whose name is also Lisa McLendon. I did not want to confuse it. Was a little bit specific there. Okay, we tell it, hey, please give us some text on this. Hey, please generate a picture of 3 kittens in a basket. Please generate an image of happy birthday written in Scrabble tiles. That is actually something that I got on my birthday, which was recently, that a friend did, and it was horrible because it wasn't Scrabble tiles at all, and happy birthday was misspelled. So.
Did your friend know this?
Oh yeah, it was a joke, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it was on purpose. It was on purpose. You know, and we can get more specific about that. We can ask it to do more and more specific things, and it will do what we ask it to. It will do only what we ask it to, like most computers do exactly what we ask it to. It cannot read our minds, but it will do what it thinks we're asking it to do, you know? I mean, we may think we're asking it to do something else, but it may see the words and go, oh, they want this. Okay, all right. So what this does is all of that training data that went into a large language model, the billions and billions of words that the LLM got trained on, it looks at all of those and it analyzes all those words and it recognizes patterns and it recognizes that if you have due to, often it is followed by the fact that or sometimes other things. And it may know that, you know, of is pretty much always going to be followed by a noun. Okay, and how do auxiliary verbs work and all this kind of stuff. It's really, really complicated. And think how long it takes to learn to speak English as a native. Think how long it takes to learn another language not as a native. Okay, and it absorbs the grammar and the vocabulary and the spelling just like that. Just like that. Okay, it's hard. It's very hard. It's hard to learn another language. You have to put a lot of time, a lot of effort in. You have to listen, you have to think, you have to write, you have to talk to people, you have to read and read and read and read and try and learn as much as you can. All right? It just does that. Okay? And it takes all that data that it has and it says, okay, I'm going to spit out some text that is about these things. Okay. But notice that we call it generative AI. We do not call it creative AI. It generates. It spits back what it knows. It draws on what it already knows to predict what it thinks you want and spits that back out at you. For better or for worse. Okay? It doesn't know how to spell happy birthday. Does not know how to spell, does not know what an index card is. You knew I was going to put that in there. You knew I was going to put that in there. Does not know what an index card is. I spent a half hour over the summer trying to get an image of an index card with writing and finally gave up. And you'd think that that would be a very easy thing, but it was not. It was not. It's like, I'll just take a picture of an index card with writing. It would have been done in 10 seconds. But yeah, it knows only what it has been trained on. And even though it has been trained on billions and billions and billions of things, it doesn't know anything beyond that. What could possibly go wrong? All right, and you know we ask this question when we know there's definitely something that could possibly go wrong. Definitely something that could possibly go wrong. We have bad input, okay? Some of the large language models have not been very discriminating on the training data. All right, they send these scrapers just all over the internet to scrape up language examples and feed it into the LLM, okay? How many of you have ever read the comments section on an article online? Okay, is that a paragon of civility and good grammar? No, it isn't, okay? Bad data there, okay? It might be biased. There's a lot of bias. There's a lot of bias built into that. And it's not necessarily, I mean, it's not the computer's fault that it is trained on input data that's biased, but it is. But it is. Kind of an example of that is in the same training session that I was at over the summer, where I was trying to get the index card to go. We were supposed to have an AI image generator create an avatar for ourselves. Okay? And so I typed in, middle-aged professor with curly dark hair and glasses. And it spit back 4 images of men. And I had to specify female if I didn't want men. That's an example of that. And that's just a really simple thing. And lots of people have looked at assumptions. If you ask ChatGPT, a professor and a student are talking about, whatever, which one is John and which one is Mary? They'll always say the professor is John and the student is Mary. That kind of thing. I mean, the assumptions based on the data that are pulled in give you that kind of bias. And sometimes it's just incomplete information. It may not have scraped the whole thing. I mean, you've probably all heard about, Google telling you to cook with glue to stick something. And sometimes it's really dangerous information. To eat things that you really shouldn't eat or mix things that you really shouldn't mix. Some of it is funny, but some of it is actually like hazardous. So that incomplete information can be really bad. The analysis might be muddled or faulty. It may not understand context. If it didn't get complete data and then doesn't understand the context for what it did get, it can lead to poor analysis. And then it can give you vague output. That's really what I notice. When students try to write something with AI, it's vague. It's really vague. There aren't specific details. It's going to be biased if it's, garbage in, garbage out. You feed it biased data, you're going to get biased output. It might just be incorrect. It might just be made up. ChatGPT is known for what they call hallucinations, which is it is very assertively tells you something that is either not correct or completely fabricated. So you have to watch out for that. And this is another thing where it might not be wrong, but it might be wrong for a particular audience. Okay, and this is really where we come in as people, because we are thinking about, why are we writing this? What is the purpose of what we are writing? Who is our audience for this? ChatGPT doesn't think about that. LLMs aren't thinking about that. They're just spitting back what you asked. But if you're writing something for high school students, the tone is going to be very different from if you're writing for an audience of people who will come and sit in this lecture at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Okay, that's a really different audience. If you're writing directions on how to take diabetes medication, You want that as clear and simple as possible, because you're going to get people of all ages, of all education levels, of varying levels of proficiency in English, and you don't want anybody to take the wrong dosage there, okay? You want to be really, really careful about that, and a human will understand, oh, this is not clear at all, even though it's technically correct, it may not be right. It may not be right. So we've got some pitfalls there, you know, and again, it does what we ask it to based on what it knows, based on what it knows. There are lots of jobs out there now for prompt engineers. And this is not engineers who show up on time. This is people who write the prompts that you feed into AI to get it to spit out more closer to what you want, closer to what you want. Which involves a little bit of computer savvy and a little bit of finesse and a little bit of I'm not sure what because it keeps changing. But prompt engineering, you know, you see that if you look on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of that. You'll see a lot of that. And I think a lot of people don't really know exactly what that means, but what it does mean is you have to know how to ask AI the right question to get the right output, So, you know, it's so far along now that we have jobs to manage it. We have jobs for people managing it. Just kind of in general, I didn't feel like I could talk about AI without talking about some of the more general pitfalls that are involved with AI systems. Ethical issues, a lot of training data has been scraped without permission. And there are a couple of lawsuits pending, and the New York Times has sued over that, over a large language model being trained on its archives without the permission of the New York Times. Dig deep into the user agreements of some of the products that you use, and it's probably using stuff that you generate. If you haven't turned off the permission settings, Microsoft, I'm looking at you. You have to go into Microsoft and turn off that extra features button. And it doesn't really very clearly say, oh, we have extra cloud services that you may be able to use, which means we're going to scrape everything that you put in Word and use it to train our AI. Artists have been very upset that image generating AIs have used their art as training data without permission. It has been trained on copyright protected information without the permission of the copyright holder and a lot of that sort. So there's ethical issues there. Obviously on the flip side, plagiarism, people passing off AI generated work as their own. And I'm not just talking about, you know, students in college here. Academic papers have been generated with ChatGPT. Peer reviews of academic papers have been generated using ChatGPT. You know, speeches, information for government websites, you know, like city, not the federal government, so, as far as I know, but like city and county governments have taken stuff from ChatGPT. And obviously the bias issue. But also data isn't private, okay? And this is kind of something that a lot of people don't realize. If you put something into ChatGPT and say, could you please edit this for me? Unless you have turned off the sharing settings, it's going to use that as part of its training data. And then if somebody else asks it, hey, what do you know about whatever obscure topic you just put something in to be edited on, it's going to spit back with that stuff. And that may be sensitive information, that may be preliminary data about something, it may be something that is incomplete, but it doesn't know that because it lacks that context. It lacks the context here. And then the environmental impacts, which I think people don't realize are huge. AI servers use a lot of energy, They use a lot of water. And I don't know if you all read the recent news story. Remember, some of you remember 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, the United States' worst nuclear disaster? They're going to restart 3 Mile Island to power Microsoft AI. They haven't done it yet, but it's in the works. It's in the works. Okay, I'm talking a lot of power here. And so that's one thing to think about too. It's like, do we just want to use this as a toy? And we do not. You know, I think we need to know what it can do, what it can't do, kind of how it works, but I would advise people against using it as a toy for just that reason. You know, just to mitigate some of the, I mean, one person not doing it isn't going to make a difference, but a lot of us will. A lot of us will. But back to writing. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT to tell me a bedtime story. Read this and see what you think about it. Can you all see? Steve, can you see in the back? Okay. That was it. That's what it gave me. And you guys are all kind of making the meh face. Which, yeah, it's kind of off, right? It's just sort of off.
Actually, it's coming better than I expected.
All right, here's the thing. It does know proper grammar, spelling, punctuation. It won't give you sentence fragments. It doesn't mix up affect and effect. Okay, so in other words, mechanically, it's very good. And I think sometimes the good mechanics make us go, wow, a computer can write that. But there's not a lot in the story. So they went on a journey, but did they find what was the crystal there for? Why was it there? What did it actually do? Yeah. You know, did they find the crystal? Why did she go back to the sky? Right. You know, I mean, try telling this to a 4-year-old and, you know, why? But why? Why? What's this? Well, who's that? Why are they there? That it doesn't really, it doesn't quite get there. It doesn't quite get there.
I guess I'm thinking the language is a little more sophisticated.
The language is very sophisticated, yeah.
I've seen in other generative
Yeah.
AI results.
Yeah, mischievous sprites and shimmering shadows. Yeah.
A little trite.
Very trite, yeah. The true magic was the bond they formed along the way. Aww. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it looks nice. It's polished. However, it's just kind of lacking. It's just kind of lacking. And again, let's go back to why we write, okay? It kind of almost reads like a news story. You know, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Okay. You know, which for really basic breaking news kind of stories, okay. That's the record and inform part, okay? Record and inform is fine, but remember, we write to do a lot of these other things, okay? And so what is a bedtime story supposed to do? It's first and foremost supposed to entertain, okay? But also good bedtime stories do, you know, maybe a little bit of enlightenment or illumination or inspiration, okay? And I'm sorry, Leora, but falling from the sky, learning that the journey is what makes you friends, and then going back up into the heavens for no apparent reason is just not cutting it. It's just not getting beyond any of the basic elements of writing. And that's where one of the weaknesses of generative AI is. And that is where the human soul comes in. And I don't mean soul in necessarily a religious sense, although take it that way if you want to, but I mean the essence of humanity. What makes us human? What sets us apart? That spark of intellect combined with imagination, combined with creativity. That's what I mean. And that's what we have, and that's what this is still lacking. It's fine at the inform, mostly. Okay, I'm not going to say great. I'm going to say okay because it does hallucinate and make stuff up for you. But all the rest stuff, that's the tricky bits. That's the tricky bits. So this is an interesting one. My colleague Chris Etheridge was noticing, he was reading about ESPN using AI to generate basic game coverage stories. Okay, so this is a basic kind of breaking news story. This is really just to inform. Okay, record and inform. We're not going beyond recording and informing here. And they noticed by ESPN generative AI services, they were very transparent about use of AI, although they did say that humans would review this. Okay, so take a look at the part I circled in green. Okay, and notice that this is from like a week ago or a week and a half ago. Okay, Orlando Pride buoyed by the efforts of Ali Watt and Marta. Okay, this is a National Women's Soccer League story. Okay, here is another National Women's Soccer League story. Okay, here's another one. And another one, of the late effort. Okay, buoyed by the late effort of Abby Dahlkemper. Okay, yeah, so ESPN has said, well, we have generative AI do these stories because we don't cover it. We don't have someone at every one of these games, and we would have zero coverage of women's soccer if it weren't for this. or zero regular coverage of women's soccer. They do features and stuff still, and actual humans write those. But just sort of the day-to-day gamers, it says basically these are Mad Libs, and AI can fill them in. And okay, I mean, they're not wrong. Even back when I was copy editing at the newspaper, every day I had to do the stock market story that went on our stock market page. And it was always like, stocks finished higher, lower, based on gains, losses in the tech restaurant industry. I mean, it was kind of like that. It really was sort of Mad Libs, plug it in. Okay, so the idea here is, if you use it to do that generic story, that might free up your business reporter to pursue more interesting topics, things that would relate a little bit better to your audience. Okay, good. Or you can include coverage that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Okay. But the problem here again is it's boring. It's boring. It's all the same. Now, granted, probably you're only going to be reading the story about your own team. And so you're not going to see 20 stories that start with buoyed by the efforts of or whatever. But still, one would have thought that the human being theoretically reviewing these would have noticed and sort of changed it up a little, would have said, hey, could we maybe change the wording here? It wouldn't take very long. It wouldn't take very long. But they didn't. But they finally did. Yay! So we have the KC Current. But this one's a little different because they set the regular season record for team goals. Okay, so I don't know whether the AI thought of this itself or whether the human reviewing it went, wait a minute, the lead here is not necessarily that they won buoyed by someone's efforts. The lead is that they have now set the record for regular season goals. Okay, and so maybe the human massaged that copy. I don't know. It's not reflected in the byline. But maybe it was sort of like, rewrite this, focusing on the fact that they set the record. Okay, I will do that. Here it goes. Here it goes. Okay, so, and again, it's polished. That's a pretty decent sports lead. I mean, it has the two teams in it. It has the score in it. It has the location and the date, and it even focuses on the player that had some influence, okay? When we're teaching our students how to write leads, this is pretty good. Like include the score in the lead, which is something we actually have to tell them and they sometimes forget. But, it actually just happened. Just this in the past week or two, I had to say, guys, the score is not anywhere in this story. Carol, yeah.
Where does AI get all of this information about the games?
They feed a box score in.
Okay.
Yeah, it will look at the box score of the game. So it gets the data from the game. Like who scored a goal, when was it scored, what the final score was. And for different games, it can do different stories. So like you say, okay, this is how to read a baseball box score. This is how to read a hockey box score. This is how to read a football box score. And so it can take the data, the downs and the yards and the field goals and whatever, and spit out a reasonable.
It ends up getting, you can see how much I know, right?
Yeah. And probably, I would guess, in these kinds of cases, the clubs themselves send the info to either a server that ESPN has access to, or there's a feed where they send it out, and whoever wants it can get it. Or ESPN has set up some kind of a bot to scrape the site as soon as the data comes up and do that. And this is something that's all above board. I mean, they basically have said to the women's soccer teams, yeah, we're going to do it this way. So the teams probably are like, here, have our data then. At least we get some coverage instead of nothing. And computers do it, and it's workable. It's not great. I mean, but straight up gamers are just not. And that's why, you don't want to write a straight up gamer. You want to write something interesting. Maybe you want to write about setting the regular season record for goals. Okay, what does this mean? But look, it even included, the current broke the record of 54, because that would be, as an editor, my next question, what was the previous record? Boom, it's there. Okay, and like I said, again, I'm not sure how much the human editor had a hand in this one. Maybe some, maybe none. Did they send it back through and ask for a rewrite? I don't know. I don't know the process of that. I don't know anybody who works there right now. And that I could ask about that, but it would be very interesting to find out. But yeah, for the kids who want to write gamers, too bad, AI can write your gamers. Find something interesting. Find something interesting. And the point is that you still need a human. The point is that we are still important in the writing process. We are still important in the information landscape. We are still important for all the rest, all right? Beyond recording, beyond informing, all the rest of the stuff, that is what we do. That is what we can do. That is what we bring to it. And that is something that I have told my students, look, if you can't write any better than AI, what are you bringing to an employer? Okay, if you can't write any better than those AI-generated gamers, too bad. You know, they're going to have AI do it because AI is cheap, all right, and you're expensive. So you're going to have to go above and beyond, enlighten me, persuade me, illuminate something, inspire me, entertain me, challenge me, okay? Something like that, we have to go beyond. And we can go beyond. This is the skill that we bring. This is what we bring here. We also bring important things like fact-checking. Fact-checking, audience engagement, specifics, multiple perspectives. Multiple perspectives. And that is really sort of interesting too. I was working with a professor earlier this semester who's at the University of Hawaii who has developed an AI that is intended to help journalism students. And he said it's not a generative AI, but you put in a story and it analyzes, and you can pick different things that do you want it to look at your grammar? Do you want it to look at AP style? Do you want it to look at sourcing, storytelling, math? There's a few other things that you can like pick what you want it to do. And it's kind of interesting. It's not great yet. He's still beta testing it. So I had my class test it with stories that we had already done in class. We had already done them as assignments. And so they knew what they were looking for. Okay, and so they each got one of the ones and they fed it in and they said, okay, what is it telling us to do? Okay, well, a couple of them it said more sources, and that was good because a couple of the stories needed more sources. But the sources that it suggested were completely inappropriate for a student newspaper. Talk to, Dr. So-and-so at the CDC. It's like, no. It's like we need more student voices in this story. Go find a psych professor to talk about the bigger issue of reverse culture shock or something like that, But look for people on this campus, and it didn't quite get to that part of like helping students figure out the sourcing is where it really needed work. And so we did that, and I sent the guy a long, detailed message about how we'd done that, and he's, oh yeah, thanks so much. And so he's still working on it. It's still in a testing phase. And I think that something like that where it could give good feedback to students, especially at the early stages, especially your students who come back with a gamer for the Kansan, and it's boring. Okay, so maybe it could say, okay, look, you don't have a score anywhere in this, or the really interesting thing you put way down at the bottom of the story, or do we have any other sources besides the coach at the press conference? And sometimes we don't, and that's just kind of how that goes in sports, and that's all right. But to give it really good feedback, that would be a really useful tool. I'm not saying that all AI is bad and we should just ignore it and leave it alone and boycott it. No, that's not it. It can be a very useful thing. It can help in lots of ways, but it needs a lot of human help to get there and to keep an eye on it and to make sure. But yeah, and the human would be, and I think the human would be the one saying, we need somebody else's perspective in here. We've talked to this person, and we've talked to this person, and we've talked to this person, but there's a whole group of people over here that are also affected by this that are missing from this coverage, which is what a good editor will always do. We'll say, hey, we need this voice in the story. We need to hear from these people. We need to hear from these people. And again, with news in particular, the who, what, where, when, we just saw. AI can do that, no problem. No problem. But we see the why and the how. Okay, we see why is this important. We can find this is the interesting little nugget that we're actually going to bring into the lead to tease people, to bring people into this story. We know because we are thinking about our audience, what needs more explanation, okay? What do people need to know a little bit more about? And I'm going to anticipate that, and I'm going to anticipate the question that members of my audience, my readers might have, and put that answer in there for them. And we can see in our community overlooked stories, stuff that doesn't get covered, voices that are unheard. I mean, that is part of journalism, to elevate the stories and the voices that aren't told, to tell those stories. And we do that. We observe, we go out and we see things, we analyze, we react, we question, we ask lots of questions. We should ask lots of questions. We imagine things. You know, we have a little bit of a sense of imagination. What if? What if? Carol, thank you for this quote. I'm using it. Carol and I were talking about this presentation a couple of weeks ago, and Carol very simply said, well, AI can't be there.
That's true.
Of course it can't, but we can. But we can. We are there. We can observe. We can analyze. We can pull things together. We can make those connections. We can see the interesting, the new, the previously unknown. We think about it. We connect with other people. We connect stories. We connect ideas. We create. We can tell stories. We create writing that enlightens, informs, entertains, challenges, inspires. Something unexpected is what sets ours apart. And that's, the unexpected is what makes that connection. It brings delight to the audience. It surprises. It may shock. It's unexpected. And the whole idea of generative AI is that it predicts based on stuff it already knows. It says, well, I expect this to come next, and so I'm going to give you this next. This kind of reminds me of a story I saw a couple of years ago about Beethoven's 10th Symphony. Okay? And if any of you know much about Beethoven, you know he didn't finish the 10th Symphony. It was unfinished. He had notes. There were notes. It was sort of roughed out. My dad is a big Beethoven fan. And so I saw the story and I read it and then I sent it to him. And what they had done is they had taken Beethoven's notes for the 10th Symphony and they had fed it into an AI and said, finish the symphony. And so it finished the symphony and then an orchestra played the symphony and they had a recording of it. And so he listened to it and he said, well, it sounds like Beethoven. He said it's Beethoven-esque. It's something like, when you have art, some old art, and they're like studio of someone, and you're like, well, it's Vermeer-ish, and this was like, it was technically, it matched what Beethoven would have done. I mean, yeah, composers have a sound, directors have a style, Taylor Swift has a sound, okay? You know a Taylor Swift song because even though they're not, she has lots and lots of different songs, but there's a kind of sound to that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's often an unexpected bit in there that is like, ooh, an extra little catch in there. And in the Beethoven Symphony, there was nothing unexpected. There was nothing to surprise and delight in there. Nothing to take it from, technically fine to art. And that's the difference, the unexpected. We can see things, we can intuit things, we can imagine things that a machine cannot. We can provide that surprise, that little something extra, that's something unexpected, that's something uniquely human. That at least at this point, the computer cannot do. At least at this point, they can't. So we've got all the rest in the writing. We've got beyond record, beyond inform, all those rest of the things that we're still really good at. We're still a lot better than a machine. And that little extra bit of unexpected. And that connects us to our readers. That connects our readers to other communities, places in the world, especially with journalism. We go where our readers can't. We talk to people that readers can't talk to. We tell the stories that readers wouldn't see otherwise. And we know how to do that because we are there, because we imagine what people might want to know. We think about stories that have gone untold and how to tell those stories in such a way that will enlighten an audience, that will illuminate a problem, that will inspire people to do something. So what do we do thinking about the future here? I mean, these things are getting better. As I said at the very beginning, 2 years ago, ChatGPT just spit out nonsense about who I was. Okay, and it's actually like adjacent to what I do now. It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better. I mean, none of it is actually really wrong, but it's not really right. But it's not like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is a completely different person, which it was a couple of years ago. Okay, so it's improving. It's improving. Some questions that I've been asked about this. What about AI slop? Is it flooding the internet? Yes, it is. Will it flood the internet? And what do I mean by AI slop? It's just anything that is just crud generated by AI that people just crank out and put out there to get clicks on their website and sell ad space and make money. Okay? Most of the junk that you see on the internet and the junk that you see on social media is there for one reason only, because someone is making money off of it. Someone is making money off of your eyeballs on that stuff, or other people's eyeballs on that stuff. And it's already there. It's already there. The flip side of that, though, is that actual human-generated, tailored content, bespoke content, if you will, if we can get all fancy about it if you want to, it's going to stand out. Okay? There's a sea of, just boring, generic, vague junk out there on the internet. If you've got something that is interesting, that is engaging, that surprises and delights readers, that gives them something that they want or need, that is going to stand out. It's not just another page full of junk that they have to scroll on by. And we know how to think about that. We understand, what are people interested in? We listen to people talk. We listen to conversations. I tell my students who are going out to look for stories, it's like, okay, listen, over here, eavesdrop. Okay, people who are in line at the cafeteria in front of you, what are they talking about? Okay, people sitting on the bus, what are they talking about? Okay, gosh, I really wonder why. Okay, anytime you hear somebody say that, listen, okay, and see if that is something that you could write a story that would answer. Could you do a report on something that would answer that question, that would explain that problem or that issue for people? Because chances are, if one person is articulating that, a lot of people probably have that question. And we get that. As people, we can see that. As people, we can figure out, we can talk to other people and answer those questions. All right. This is actually kind of interesting. What about AI collapse? AI collapse is kind of an interesting phenomenon. And that means that AI starts using AI-generated content as its training data. So these LLMs, instead of scraping the New York Times, are scraping the AI slop. And they're scooping it up, and they're training itself on itself, and it keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse until everything is just junk. Research has found, and I put a couple of citations there if anyone's interested. Actually, one is just an article in the New York Times, which is fascinating, which shows, think about how when you make a photocopy of something, and then make a photocopy of the photocopy, and then make a photocopy of that photocopy, and how after about 10 iterations, it's crud. I mean, it's really hard to read. It's blurry. It's just not very good. All right, today's photocopies are a little bit better, but it still happens, okay? You're making a copy of a copy of a copy. And that's what happens. And the article in the New York Times will shows basically how, if you're trying to teach it to identify letters and numbers, you feed it in and it spits it out, and then you keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and pretty soon, in like 30 iterations, you get gibberish. You can't see, you can't tell anything. Same thing if you train AI on faces. If you have it generate faces and then train it on those faces that it generated, and then do that again and again, pretty soon you get a bunch of sort of whitish, brownish, androgynous, darkish haired people that all look the same, that all have the same smile, that all have the same eyes. It just does that. With language, what happens, this is the second study on here, that if you keep training an LLM on generative AI content, there is a smaller range of vocabulary and less variation in sentence length and sentence structure. So that is really, that is a real thing. So, I think that programmers have to be very judicious about the training data that they use, about what goes in, because what comes out is going to be not very good if they're not careful. People's jobs. Okay, but yeah, is AI coming for your job? Well, if all you want to do is write gamers, yeah, AI is coming for your job. Yeah, it is. But interestingly enough, in LinkedIn, soft skills are more important than ever because humans understand things like nuance and how to interact with other humans, and how to make connections and how to read emotions and how to follow ethics and stuff like that. It also rejects people with ethnic sounding names. It does. I just last week read a story about that. So yeah, if you have a name that is not Anglo-Saxon and is not male and Anglo-Saxon, it's far more likely to put you in the no pile for no apparent reason with identical qualifications, which again, this is something that has effects on real people's lives. Which means you cannot take humans out of the equation. And I know they're like, oh my gosh, we just got 500 applications for this job. Help us sort through this. And some company swoops in and says, oh, hey, our AI can help you sort through this. Well, it can help you sort through it, but it doesn't help you sort through it very well. And they're like, well, we didn't say well, we just said help you sort through it. Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's stuff that we really have to be aware of there before we get too reliant on things like that. What do we do? I just finished a book called Burnham Wood, and this line really stuck out to me. Her first instinct was to, in every unpredicted circumstance, was to outsource her imagination to her phone. And we need to be really careful not to do that. Because if we don't use it, it's going to get rusty, all right? As I said at the very beginning, writing takes effort, writing takes time, writing takes practice. But it is something that we do as humans for a lot of different reasons, and we do it very well, and we do it unexpectedly. And that is why we get things like A Tale of Two Cities. That is why we get things like Things Fall Apart. All those kinds of things. Literature. We get good journalism. We get stories that haven't been told. We get people who dig in, who figure out a way around a barrier because they've thought about it. I'm going to get this information one way or another. Well, maybe it's not public. Well, maybe I'm going to figure out a way to ask someone else, ask people, or figure out who can give me an answer for something like that. It is not an easy process. It takes time. It takes work. It takes effort. But the product is always going to be better. The product is better. And that's the soul of the story. Presence, being there, connection, connecting with other people, connecting ideas, connecting people with ideas, creation of something new and unexpected. What questions do you have?